Nothing But Truth on AFR Talk.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. We continue with our guest, David Perdoso. Thank you. Crane, you know the name. You've had him on for over the years, and you're having to read it off a teleprompter. Don't ever criticize President Obama. David Perdoso, editor of the new Conservative Intelligence Briefing, Washington Examiner columnist, and New York Times best-selling author. And David, before the break, you know the question. As he lines up here and looks at the international law, the red line being crossed, President Obama was genuine. He went about attempting to do this. It wasn't specifically timed. It wasn't a half-hearted effort. No, he really wanted to make sure that Syria got the message, do not use these again, and he was outgamed, he was outclassed on the world stage by Vladimir Putin in attempting to get that done.
Well, I think that's right. I think that's a pretty accurate description. I mean, I don't think that there are any nefarious motives here. Maybe I'm sure that somewhere in the back of Obama's mind he is thinking about his legacy, yes. But in the long run, you end up with an intervention where it's very difficult to see any interest whatsoever on our part. As far as the nation goes, and yet here Obama is, and he's talking about, after World War I, the world came together and said, look, we're not going to do chemical warfare anymore. It's just too horrible. And that's great. I support the Geneva Conventions. I think it's wonderful that we have that. I just don't, to see us as the world's sole enforcer and to get involved in yet another war in that part of the world seems kind of crazy.
Well, there's a lot more to it, though.
Sorry.
No problem. I don't mean to interrupt, hopefully interject, but my point is it's about much more than just the military strike and how ill it was defined and how he did not communicate it. And the fact is normally he campaigns on things, and he didn't do a very good job of it here or otherwise in the world. And in the idea of military force to enforce this red line. But the other point is, what does he believe in? Okay, he believes in international law, but I think a lot of Americans are, including myself, are sitting there going, what does he believe in? In 2011, he had the opportunity to support a rebel faction that certainly wasn't as infiltrated by the likes of al-Nusra and other al-Qaeda-affiliated groups. And in Egypt, he didn't have to support the Muslim Brotherhood. He didn't have to deny their theological roots, but he did. So you know a lot about President Obama. What does he believe in? What are his principles?
Well, when it comes to foreign policy,
yes.
I think that, we've basically had a policy of just kind of adapting to the circumstances and trying to cause the least amount of trouble that we can for ourselves possible. It's just that it hasn't worked out very well, and it does seem like Obama's foreign policy, whatever the goals are, it's been very much a disaster. You have, going from one thing to another, whether it's the the Russian reset, the fact that obviously our relations with Russia are a complete disaster at this point. To see Putin rub it in today on 9/11, last night when it went up on 9/11 on the New York Times website is, I think, kind of an embarrassment, whether you like President Obama or not. You have to feel kind of bad about this. Then you have the whole question, okay, what about Libya? What about Egypt? What part of the world is better off? What part of the world respects us more? The Gallup polls show that they don't, that they hate us even more than they did back when Bush was president. And that's a low bar. So, it's a pretty difficult situation. It's basically the Obama foreign policy has been a policy of waiting until you get gamed somehow, and it's happened yet again.
I get the idea that he got health care accomplished. I mean, he got it through, got it done. Yeah, he used a parliamentary trick, or not trick, but something that's been used by Republicans, too, to get the legislation through. He got Obamacare. He got Dodd-Frank.
Right.
He does very well when he has, and this is going to sound reactionary. I don't mean it this way. I'm looking at it going, he has the mainstream media carrying his water. He has both, he had nearly both houses, or he did have both houses of Congress, and he got his agenda through. But without the power, with opposition, with a place where he has to actually make a case, he can't do it. And the idea of his persuasive skills or his skills as a leader to highlight something and bring it through, they're not there because it's all based on, hey, the system better be fixed in one way or another toward me, toward my advantage, because otherwise I can't get it done. Your thoughts?
Right. No, it does seem that way. I would have to agree with that. Basically, Obama lost the Congress in 2010, and he has not had the support he has needed to do pretty much anything out of what he wanted to do that you might think of as promoting the common good. I mean, fine, yes, we've got some of these ridiculously partisan regulations going through, things that are very upsetting to people, like the HHS mandate, other things like that. But you don't have you really don't have, successes you can point to. Once he's lost the Congress, Obama's not good at working with people who disagree with him. I think it's as simple as that.
Okay, and when we look at how the ripple effect impacts the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling discussion about defunding Obamacare, do you think how does that impact that debate? Does it go in favor of, hey, defund, he's down, he doesn't have support? Or is it something where he'll come back and he'll say, look, I may have messed up there, but we've got to make sure Obamacare is funded? I mean, what do you see happening? I know what Jay Carney said today.
I do think that Obamacare is a massive priority for him. He is not going to let that go down. And this is part of the, I think, miscalculation that's going on among some Republicans and conservatives, and including, like friends of mine that I personally know in Washington. It's very difficult right now on the right and in the Republican Party, because you have a lot of people calling for this defunding thing, which, look, I'm as against this law as anyone you'll find, but it's somewhat unrealistic, the idea that you can just, get Obama to knuckle under on this. That's just not going to happen. I mean, he may lose to Putin. He may get gamed by Putin, but when it comes to domestic politics, he has a much better head on his shoulders for that, and he is not going to give up on Obamacare until you've shut the government down for, I don't know, probably a few months. I mean, I see Obama faltering, and I see him weak, and I see him dangling there, and I see the Republicans cutting their own throats right now instead of doing the effective thing that's going to help them in the long run beat him.
David Ferdoso, editor of the New Conservative Intelligence Briefing, Washington Examiner columnist, and New York Times best-selling author. His latest book out beginning of this year, pardon me. We're still in it. Thanks, Crane. Spin Masters, How the Media Ignored the Real News and Helped Reelect Barack Obama, President Obama. Hey, thank you for taking the time. I want to check in with you as we get closer to the debate really heating up. It's heating up in the sense of defunding, and it's been great to speak with you. Thank you for making time for us tonight, David.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Crane.
Always, buddy. All right. Now, as we are closing out, interestingly enough, that issue was addressed. The defunding of Obamacare was addressed in today's press conference by Jay Carney. And Jay Carney responded to this, and it would be cut number 9. Cut number 9. Here is Jay Carney responding to the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling, the outcome. Hey, will you get behind or support anything that has defunding Obamacare in it? Roll it.
Our view is that Congress needs to act to avoid a shutdown. Washington should not, engage in activity that, creates more self-inflicted wounds on the economy. And a shutdown would do just that. At a time when we've created, since the Great Recession, 7.5 million private sector jobs, when we've seen steady economic growth, we've seen improvements in a housing market that was obviously in dire straits during the recession, and we are continuing to make progress. there is certainly more work to do, and allowing a government shutdown for ideological reasons would be hugely counterproductive. So when it comes to, we haven't seen any bill yet. Our position, obviously, is that we will not accept anything that delays or defunds Obamacare.
All right. Well, Senator Bob Corker also weighed in today on President Obama, and we're only going to play one part of what he had to say, but it is pretty harsh, and it's harsh because he calls the president out, and he calls him out specifically in, well, cut number 4, if we could get that ready. Here he is questioning if the president wants to be president. Roll it.
And I really do think they've hurt our credibility around the world just in the muddled way that they have dealt with this Syrian issue. It's just a complete muddlement, if you will. And I don't know, the president just seems to be very uncomfortable being commander-in-chief of this nation.
Very uncomfortable with being commander-in-chief of this nation. He's never been comfortable with foreign policy. In fact, he listed global warming as a major priority in one of the reviews because that was an enemy. We needed that, dealt with national security. I mean, it's very misguided. And when we have a president who continues, and the people that work for him, not to answer questions, what does that leave us with? Because we almost feel like we're talking in a tunnel. It's like, okay, he's not telling the truth, and everybody's like, yeah, I know. But there are those that don't know, and how to present that case and how to make that case. Not because it's about President Obama, but it's about policies not working and not being able to fix them because the mainstream media is not telling the truth about them. Or it's a scandal where we don't have justice when it comes to the likes of Benghazi and the victims of Benghazi. We also have a agency going out of control, targeting groups that disagree with the president's ideology and using the power of the IRS to do just that. This is what do you do with corruption? What do you do with it? Well, first and foremost, you expose it, and you put the focus on the corruption and not necessarily the personalities of the people involved. The Putin-Obama exchange and what Putin wrote today, I look at that as pure sophistry, and also a man who's an absolute opportunist who thinks we don't know the history of his butcher bill. Awful, awful man. And yeah, the president's policies have weakened this nation. We're going to feel the impact of those, not only in the short term, but the long term. We need to point out how before, hopefully, it really costs us. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.